Hello, Jeff Zwerink here, and welcome to Give and Take, another special episode on scene at the ETS, the Evangelical Theological Society. I'm excited today because I have Mike Licona in studio here, and we are going to talk about evidence for the resurrection. Mike, it's good to have you here today.
Well, thanks, Jeff.
So I know you have a PhD in New Testament, you're a faculty at Houston Baptist, and I know you've talked a lot about the resurrection. So kind of tell us, how compelling is the evidence for the resurrection?
Well, compelling, of course, is a pretty subjective. Well, what's compelling to me may not be compelling to an atheist, but I think the evidence for the resurrection is quite strong.
How would you articulate? What is the best evidence for the resurrection? Or how would you articulate the evidence for the resurrection?
Depends how much time I had.
Well, let's say we've got 5 minutes here.
Okay, 5 minutes, I'd say, well, all right, look, there are a number of facts, we say historical facts, that are so strongly evidenced that even a nearly consensus of scholars in the relevant field accept them. Now, I can unpack them, but you've only given me 5 minutes, right?
That's fair.
So that would be things like Jesus' death by crucifixion, that shortly after his death, a number of his disciples had experiences they truly believed were appearances of the risen Jesus to them. And also then you've got the same thing about the skeptic Paul. Paul was a persecutor of the church. He thought Jesus was a false prophet, a failed Messiah, and he had an experience that he was convinced was the risen Jesus to him, and it radically transformed his life from being a persecutor of the church to one of its most able defenders. So as a historian, you've got to account for those facts. Okay. You can just go ahead if you want to dispute them, but I use those as what we could call minimal facts or historical bedrock because they're basically facts beyond doubt.
So when you say they're largely agreed on, is that just within the Christian community, or is that larger than that?
Oh, much larger. It's Gary Habermas has done a lot of study on this. I can only go on hunch based on all the literature I've written, which is quite extensive. But he's written read a whole lot more, and so he's actually can give bean counting.
Right.
He's counting all over 3,500 academic sources written on the topic since 1975, and he would say virtually 100% of scholars. So that's conservative Christians, moderate Christians, liberal Christians, atheist, agnostic, Jewish scholars, that would be historians or New Testament scholars.
So this kind of boils down to not just, okay, we're quibbling over what actually happened. These are things that everybody agrees actually happened, or facts, if you will. And
you might have a few flakes on the way out there might say Jesus never existed, but it's rare as hen's teeth to find a scholar who holds that.
Fair enough. Okay, that's good to know. So any sort of explanation you have has to account for all of these facts.
That's correct.
Why does the resurrection actually account for these facts better than others? So give me a counterexample or some other explanation somebody might have.
Say, for example, hallucinations. Okay, that is perhaps the most popular one offered today by non-believing scholars. There's several, but that's probably the most popular one, and it's the most easily refuted too. So hallucinations are a phenomena. They're experiences that occur in the mind of an individual. They have no external referent to it. Okay. From what we know from studies done over the past century and longer is there are various modes of hallucinations. You could see something that's not there, hear something that's not there, taste, smell, have the sense of motion, all that. But the only people who experience them in multiple modes would be schizophrenics and those who are on drugs. Okay. Other than that, you're not. You're likely to experience a hallucination in a single mode: see but not hear, taste but not smell, things like that.
Okay.
So what's interesting is all the reports we have involve appearances of Jesus. These are visual things. Okay. And the literature informs us that on average, only 7% of those who are most likely to experience a hallucination of any sort, and that would be adults bereaving the loss of a loved one, that only 7% of them experience a visual hallucination, and yet with...
So most hallucinations would be, so I hear something in my head, or I mean, what... That's
most
what
hallucinations would 39% of them would be things such as they just sense the person's presence in the room, but they don't see, hear, touch them or anything.
So no actual sensory perception, if you will.
So we're talking only 7% would be this. And yet the reports we have, multiple reports tell us that 100% experience them. An unthinkable 100%. Moreover, experienced it on several group occasions. And since hallucinations are private occurrences in the mind of an individual, they have no external reference. They're like dreams. I can't wake up my wife in the middle of the night and say, honey, I'm having a dream. Go back to sleep. Join me in my dream. Let's have a free vacation.
Right,
you know?
yeah.
You can't do that with a hallucination either. And yet there are multiple group appearances. Moreover,
So do people recognize that the group saw as well? Or so the groups thought they saw. So
not 100% of scholars,
okay, fair
but
enough.
probably somewhere between 70 and 80, 85% would grant that there were some group experiences. And the evidence is there to suggest that that was the case. Okay. One final thing I give, and there's several more I could give, but one final thing is Paul was a skeptic, and he was persecuting the church, so Jesus would have been the last person in the universe Paul would have expected to see or wanted to see.
Right.
And yet he also had an experience he believed was the risen Jesus appearing to him. When you put all this together, hallucinations become so improbable that it would take a greater miracle for the hallucination hypothesis to be true than a resurrection.
Yeah, I really did agree. That's kind of remarkable because, you know, I actually, even in my interactions, people said, oh, Jesus didn't exist, or oh, there's no evidence for that. So it's really encouraging to hear just the strength of the evidence. So as you present that to people, I mean, you know, people have other explanations. What sort of pushback do you get to the resurrection being the best explanation?
Well, it depends what audience I'm talking to. Am I talking to students at a secular university level? Am I talking to a scholar? You know, a scholar might bring up something like, well, you know, miracles cannot be investigated by historians. And to which I say, why not?
Okay.
And they'd say, well, that would be a theological explanation, not a historical one. If you say God, well, I'd just say, well, look, there's a lot of things historians can't determine the cause for, but that doesn't mean we can't say the event didn't occur.
Right.
So in this case, you just have to be open to various causes, and we could conclude as historians that the resurrection occurred. We just couldn't say God did it. So it'd be no different than if a comet slammed into the lunar surface, and when the dust cleared, there was a message written on the moon's surface in Greek and in Hebrew that says Jesus is Lord.
Right.
Well, that would take a miracle to do that. We wouldn't deny that the event occurred. A scientist could just say, well, maybe God did it, maybe he didn't. We as scientists don't have the tools to be able to verify it was God who did it. And we do the same thing as historians with the resurrection.
So you kind of affirm that that's the event that happened, even if we may not have all the details or can't put the exact cause out with God from a historical perspective.
Exactly.
Mike, I really appreciate your comments, and I think it's just very helpful. I appreciate it. You know, when we look at Christianity, one of the central components of Christianity, if you will, is the resurrection. And there's an abundance of historical evidence, both in the facts that are accepted and that Jesus rose from the dead is the best explanation for those facts. I would encourage you to go to Mike Licona's website, risenjesus.org, and you will find an abundance of resources that will equip you to use this powerful evidence to spread the gospel that God loves and saved everyone.